Read any good books lately? Well, if you're like millions of Americans, your last book wasn't a book at all, but it was some kind of an e-reader. My name is Stephanie. Welcome to Technically Speaking, the show for the technically challenged. Today we're talking about e-readers, all these devices that we can read books, newspapers, and magazines on. Of all the technical questions I'm asked every day, probably the one I'm asked most often is, what should I buy? Whether it's a camera or a computer, everyone is concerned about making the wrong decision. And since there are an endless amount of possibilities, people are just stymied as which one to choose. Unfortunately, technology is changing so rapidly that whatever you choose, you're bound to regret it a few months from now when something better and cheaper comes along. But if you choose something based on the features that you want and really need, you're bound to come up ahead. So let's talk about these e-readers and some of the features they have. There have been many different e-reader brands on the market over the past several years, but the three that have come out ahead are the Kindle, which is made by Amazon, the Nook, made by Barnes & Noble, and finally the iPad, made by Apple. Here are some other names of things that are available, but these are the ones that most people, when they say, what should I buy? That's the decision they're trying to make. Now, the first decision you have to make is whether or not you want the screen that you're reading on to be black and white or a color screen. Now, a black and white screen, here's one with a black and white screen, it's called e-ink. And it's actually the closest, most natural thing to reading a regular book. If you see the text here, it looks a lot like a book. And there are many advantages to this e-ink on a reader. For one thing, since it is the most natural and there's no glare, you won't experience eye strain. Also, you can read this outdoors. So if you're someone who likes to read on the beach or outside on a sunny day, this is the e-reader for you, because color screens just can't be read outdoors at all. Another great thing about e-ink e-readers, they're very lightweight, and the battery life lasts an enormous amount of time. We don't even just say how many hours. We'll say how many weeks and even months the battery life will last. So this mimics a book the most closely. Of course, there are disadvantages to this e-ink. For one thing, since it's only black and white, it's not really great on magazines or children's books. Another disadvantage is you can't read in the dark. So if you're the type of person who likes to read in bed, you'll have to use some sort of a book light or sit near a lamp in order to read this. And finally, e-books that are on these e-readers with the black and white, pretty much that's what it is. You're reading books. There aren't any games or other apps or fun activities, but if you're getting it to read books, and that's what you want it for, this might be the one for you. Now, a color screen, here's one with a color screen now, looks beautiful, especially for magazines, children's books, anything like that. It has a nice look to it. Also, you can read this one in the dark. So if you like to lie there on the couch or in bed and not worry about a lamp, this is the screen for you. And generally, these types of e-readers include other features, such as games, other apps, perhaps reading your email, so they're a little more full-featured than just the e-ink ones. Of course, they are much heavier. These two e-readers here are about the same size, and this one's about 3 times as heavy. The battery life on something that's in color may last 8 hours at most. So if you're a heavy reader, you're going to be recharging this every single day. Also, the color screens are a bit more expensive. So if you're reading books and you don't want to pay the extra money, it's certainly something to be considered. The next thing you'll want to think about is the screen size. Now, most e-readers come with a screen about this size, about 7 inches. And that's a nice, comfortable size if you look at either of these. I happen to have here a black and white Kindle and a color Nook. Now, incidentally, Kindle makes e-readers that are black and white, color, all sorts of different price ranges and types, and so do Nooks. I just happen to have a black and white Kindle and a color Nook with me to demonstrate. But these are about the same size, and something this size can easily fit into your purse, and you can hold it as you would a regular book. Something that's been on the market recently that people are using for an e-reader is an iPad. Now, certainly you could see that an iPad is much larger than either of these. And that larger screen means it's nice and big to look at. It looks gorgeous for newspapers and magazines, but it is much heavier, and if you're a heavy reader, your arm might get tired. Of course, these come with many, many more features besides just the books, but if you're a heavy reader, it's something to consider. On the opposite end of the size spectrum, you can actually read books on an iPhone or an iPod or an Android phone by downloading the reading app. I have books here that I read, and yes, it might be a little bit small. Here are all the books I'm in the middle of. It's incredibly convenient because wherever I go, I have a book to read. So size is something to consider when you're thinking about what you're going to do. The next feature that you're going to hear mentioned is whether or not your e-reader has 3G or Wi-Fi. Now, all of these e-readers have Wi-Fi, which means that if you are someplace that there is a wireless network, then you can be connected to the internet. Now, why is it important to be connected to the internet? Well, if for nothing else, then to get more books. The way you get books is to take your e-reader, and we'll show you there's a button to press to get more books, and they're downloaded from the internet. So if you have Wi-Fi, which all e-readers have, you'll want to be someplace where there's a wireless network. That could be your home. Many homes have one now. It could be a hotspot, such as a coffee shop or a fast food restaurant that has Wi-Fi. Many airports and hotels have it. And your internet service provider, the company that you pay to have internet in your home, probably provides you with a hotspot or Wi-Fi. Now, e-readers that are equipped with 3G means that even when you aren't in a hotspot, even when you are no place near a wireless network, you can still get internet access. So you might be standing in the middle of a highway or a field, nowhere near a wireless network, and you'll still have internet access. Now, if you're somebody who wants to make sure that you can download a book any place you are in the world, then you might want to go for the 3G. However, keep in mind that the 3G e-readers cost more at the outset and often come with a monthly fee. For example, if you chose an iPad, the 3G version costs $130 more when you purchase it, and then an additional $20 a month. That's a big chunk of change. So you might want to consider just getting the Wi-Fi version and using it where you already have a wireless network. So that's something to consider. While we're talking about price, certainly while you're thinking about shopping for these things, you'll want to think about price. At the low end of the spectrum would be a black and white e-reader, e-ink. They start with Kindles and Nooks at about $79. Since the price of e-books is less than standard books, you might actually make that up in about 10 books, just on the discount. Now, from, say, $79 for a black and white version, once we get into a color version, such as this, now we're more in the $200 range. And then finally, if you wanted to go for the iPad, those begin at $500. So again, we have a wide range of prices here depending upon your needs. If all you want to do is read books, for $79, you can have something convenient like this, throw it in your bag, and carry literally hundreds of books with you wherever you go. But there are reasons why people do spend the $500. And a lot of them have to do with other things besides reading, like games and apps and such. Finally, one more thing to consider is where the content is coming from, or which parent company owns your device. When it comes to a Nook, these are created by Barnes & Noble. So when you want to purchase books to download to your Nook, you'll be purchasing them from Barnes & Noble online, and downloading them directly to your Nook. If you decide to buy a Kindle, Kindle is created by Amazon. So all of your books and devices will be downloaded from Amazon. Now, if you already have an Amazon account and you like the interface there and you purchase lots of things, that might be a good reason to go with a Kindle. If you're a Barnes & Noble lover, a reason to go with a Nook. Now, certainly at this point, Amazon has a much wider selection of books and media than just about any other company in the world, which is a great plug for their device. However, one thing people do like about the Nook is since it's produced by a store that actually exists right here in town, if you purchase one of these devices, you can go into the store at any time, receive some technical support, ask them for some help. They even run classes and training sessions. So you might like that personal touch that somebody can help you with it. Whereas when you're dealing with a Kindle and Amazon, there is no store and there's no place to visit. So you're kind of on your own. One thing that an iPad can do is that it can get content from both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can have different apps on your iPad, so you could read books from Amazon or Barnes & Noble and jiggle between the two with no problem. So that might be a nice plug for the larger one here. Finally, you want to purchase only what you need. It's truly impossible not to be dazzled by something like this that doesn't only read books, but also plays games and movies and does just about everything but the dishes. But keep in mind, if you want to read books, you might want to get a dedicated e-reader that does just that and more in the convenience of your purse. Well, next we're going to talk about some of the features of these e-readers and how to easily access things like bookmarks, dictionaries, turning down pages, and such on your e-reader.